Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where any combination of Dr. Ross, Christian, and Brian host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money in the home as a team. Join your fellow modern husbands and have links to our podcasts, articles, and other resources to manage money in the home as a team sent to your inbox every couple of weeks by subscribing to our newsletter at modernhusbands.com. Today's guest is Dr. Jenny Olson, an assistant professor of marketing at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. Her research focuses on consumer behavior between money and couples' relationship formation and quality. In other words, she's going to help us understand the money management strategies couples use that actually lead to a happier marriage. Enjoy today's show. Well, Dr. Olson, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously your topic and your research is just right up our alley with some super interesting results to share with listeners that we know is going to be helpful for them as they work to manage money with their partners, and in particular figure out different ways to hold accounts. And I guess I want to make sure the listeners are aware that this is going to be helpful for them and as they try to figure out how to work together and manage money. So to begin, we would love to know what was it that drew you to this topic?
Have you ever heard of me search?
No, what is me search?
Yeah.
Me search is when we research things that are personally relevant to ourselves, hence the me and me search. And for me, this really, it was a me search in some ways. So I was engaged to my now husband at the time, and I remember him, his name is Nathan, if I mention his name. I remember him coming to me and saying, "Hey, Jenny, we should merge our accounts now because we're going to be getting married." And I remember I looked at him and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like an independent woman. I'm getting my PhD. Like I want my finances separate. My parents had separate finances growing up. And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, no, we got to merge finances. We can, work together and all this sort of stuff. And being a true academic, I sat back and I thought to myself, I'm like, what does the empirical research show on the benefits of merging? What is a couple to do? What are we supposed to do? And so it really stemmed from, I was in that position. I was, engaged and I didn't know what to do. And so I went to my dissertation advisor, Scott Rick, at the time. And he was like, I've been thinking about that question too. And that's kind of where we started. So it was a whole passion of me search.
I can totally relate to this. And because I'm engaged, and I think we just had the start of this conversation a couple weeks back. It was the same kind of reaction of like, well, what do you mean? What's the research say? Here's all the data points that we need to make this informed decision. But it still comes down to kind of your personal preferences.
Mm-hmm. And like every couple is different. And actually, had I met you when I was during the recruitment phase, I would now ask you if you and your partner would like to be in my research. As soon as I heard someone was engaged, I'm like, "Do you want to be in my research?" It's very intrepid.
Well, wait a second. So, Dr. Olson, first, what did you decide to do? And then Dr. Ross, what did you decide to do before we dive too deeply into this?
What did we decide to do? We decided to merge our finances. Two became one, and the rest is history.
Okay.
The rest is history.
Dr. Ross?
Well, right now we are still separate, but we are looking to create a third merged account.
Got it. Okay.
So and then we'll have each our individuals, but then we'll have a merged one for couple.
So yours, mine, and ours, right? So you each have your own, and then okay. Last question, because I know there's quite a few questions. Dr. Ross really wanted to ask Dr. Olson, when you're married for the joint account, is that where most of your money will be, and then you're just going to have a little bit of money for your own accounts for personal use, or is it going to be the other way around? Or have you gotten that far?
We haven't totally fleshed it out yet, but it will be, I think the bulk of the money will still go to our household and our family expenses or a couple of expenses.
Gotcha. The joint account. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So, but we haven't broken down exactly. I think I'm a big fan of just percentages. And so equitable splits by percentage. And so it'll probably be through, we haven't decided on the percentages, but it'll be through percentages.
So income percentages.
Yes.
So you'll contribute and she'll contribute based on your income to the joint account that goes to expenses. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, let's see what the research kind of says all about this, right?
Yeah.
We've got this expert guest here.
Maybe you change your mind.
Yeah. So, Dr. Olson, so why'd you choose to run this experiment specifically, about splitting finances and, I guess, couples' behaviors?
Sure. So when I went to my co-author, or now, co-authors who became them ultimately, we were talking about it and we're like, well, let's look at the empirical literature. And what we found were that there had been a few papers that had been published and they were correlational in nature. So you ask couples, how do you structure your finances? And then in a separate question, you ask them, how satisfied are you with your finances? And they tended to be positively correlated. So in other words, if couples had joint accounts, they tended to report also being happier. But we don't know the key question of causality. Are the joint accounts making couples happier, or is it possible that happier couples are simply more likely to merge their finances? Or was there some third variable? And so my co-authors and I realized we really need to run an experiment. And, that word hangs heavy in the air because this is real. Like, these are real couples. This is their actual day-to-day financial behaviors. How do we run an experiment on this? And so we decided that's what we were going to do. And it took a lot of planning.
So, as in layman's terms, can you walk us through kind of the study design, how you set up the experiment, what things you looked at?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of describing it kind of high level, what we did is we recruited ultimately 230 couples, male, female couples. They also had to be entering their first marriage, and they had to enter the experiment with separate accounts. So everyone was starting on the same page.
That's a good for such
yes, we
kind of participant criteria.
Right. We had some specific criteria. It took a lot of recruitment efforts on my part. So like I had mentioned, Dr. Ross, I would have been pinging you to participate. I actually was going to bridal shows at the time because for myself, and so in between cake tastings and dress fittings, I would sidle up to people and I'd say, hey, congrats on your engagement. Would you like to participate in my research? So I was able to get a good amount of people to consent to the research. And what we did then is we collected some baseline information, and then we randomly assigned them to one of 3 different conditions. In the separate accounts condition, we invited them to continue doing what they were doing. Keep your separate accounts for the duration of the experiment, which spanned 2 years. So it's a 2-year process. In the joint condition, we invited couples to discontinue using separate accounts and actively open a joint account. And we required them to send us redacted information from the bank to confirm that they indeed had a joint account. So both of their names had to appear on there. And then in the third condition, we called it the no intervention. People were invited to do whatever they wanted. So we called that the choose your own adventure. So some people maybe chose the separate to continue, or they might have opted into joint accounts. And so we followed both partners and every couple over 2 years, and we surveyed them at 6 different time points using a variety of measures, but we focused largely on relationship quality.
Interesting.
What did you find? I mean, this is really well set up. And I've always been a little bit suspicious because I see the same thing you see with the research, that couples tend to be happier when they just pull all of their money together. But then, kind of playing devil's advocate, I always think to myself, well, if you trust your partner, if everything's going well, then money's not going to be something that you're going to all of a sudden have this fear about, and that you're going to feel like that, I need to have my finances separate. You're probably going to naturally be fine with your money together. But at the same time, if things aren't going well, I can see how couples would think to themselves, ooh, I need to start to separate my finances to protect myself. So I've always thought to myself, this is correlation, meaning that happier couples just tend to also have their money together. But your key question, I want to make sure our listeners are aware of the difference, is that does putting your money together cause couples to be happier? That's a big difference. That means that by making the decision to put all of your money together, that you could be happier in marriage. So what did your study find?
A quick word from one of our sponsors, Money Marriage U.
Listeners have told us that they love the ideas we share on our podcast to manage money as a team and want to learn more. That is why we created Money Marriage U, self-paced online courses for couples designed by national financial therapy and financial planning experts. You can find our Money Marriage U courses on our website at modernhusbands.com. While visiting modernhusbands.com, be sure to join fellow Modern Husbands as bi-monthly newsletter subscribers and receive great ideas to manage money in the home as a team and a few free gifts. Now back to the show.
So thank you for restating that key question. It's an important distinction. Before I tell you our specific results, I want to highlight that all research on marriage, at least every longitudinal study I've ever seen, people naturally decline over time in terms of their happiness. So as soon as you get married, we start this long, slow, precipitous decline in relationship satisfaction. There's lots of reasons for this. One of them is just the mundane reality set in. Like I kind of joked with my husband last weekend. I'm like, I bet you never thought we'd be going to Costco on Saturdays. Like it used to be game days and, all the fun stuff, when we were a bit younger. So on average, couples naturally decline in happiness.
I enjoy
I love a good sample. I'm right there with you. And so what we found is in the separate condition, we found the predicted decline in relationship quality over time. So people naturally became less happy. In the no intervention condition, we saw a similar decline. People just naturally became less happy. But what happened in that joint condition? We found that their relationship quality trajectory, it was buffered. So they didn't increase, but they were prevented from declining over time. And so much so that at the end of the 2-year experiment, the couples that had been randomly assigned to the joint condition reported significantly greater relationship quality compared to couples in the other 2 conditions. So it was really a first demonstration of looking at the effects of bank account structure over time. So we were really excited to see these patterns.
You're actually happier when you pool your money together. That causes couples to be happier in marriage.
Correct.
And can you
go ahead, Dr.
Can you
Ross.
clarify again how you tested or examined their marriage satisfaction?
Sure.
Was it through qualitative interviews or through assessments?
Yeah, so we use survey questions. And so the couples were invited to complete 6 different surveys. And each one of those surveys had the same sets of questions. So we captured relationship quality using a few different scales. One of the items was things about relationship satisfaction. So how happy are you in your marriage? We also asked about their communication patterns, like is talking with your partner easy and smooth, or is it more difficult and challenged? We also measured just conflict, arguing with each other, etc.
Awesome.
Why do you think that the joint account holders fared better? Meaning they pulled all their money together. Why did those couples report that they're happier?
So there are a few different reasons. One of the big ones is that we observed increases in financial harmony. And so that was another measurement that we captured at all 6 time points, and we modeled the change over time. And in other words, what was it? Sorry, Brian.
What does financial harmony mean?
Yeah, so financial harmony was a composite measure. And it included things like how happy the partners were with how much they together were saving and spending. So how happy are you with your partner's attitudes toward money? How happy are you with how much you're saving together for your future? How much conflict around finances are you experiencing? So it was another composite measure. So all things considered, how happy are you about your financial life specifically?
Gotcha. Okay. And so you were talking about why you think that this caused people to be happier. You said financial harmony.
Yep, that's one reason. Another one is, so we actually ran a follow-up study after we call it the mega experiment, where we tried to identify additional reasons why couples that have joint accounts tend to be a bit better off in the long run. And another big reason is financial goal alignment. So you can imagine if we have separate accounts, I don't really know what my partner values clearly. Like maybe they're valuing, living in the moment and splurging, or maybe they're thinking about retirement. But if we're working together from a shared pool of resources, we're more likely to be on the same team so that we can act in unison to achieve our longer term financial goals. Like, hey, we're going on vacation next year. Okay, let's talk about it. That improved transparency and communication really helps partners get on the same page. We also see a third mechanism, so financial harmony, financial goal alignment. There's something called communal norms and exchange norms. So a communal norm is one where partners operate in response to each other's needs. So I'm going to help you because you need the help. It's not a prepayment for later favors. So one night I might say, hey, I'm going to go pick the kids up. You're busy with a work deadline. No big deal. I'm not sitting here harboring an expectation like you're going to make dinner then later. It's more about we have a shared household. We're all working together. And we think that the joint bank account serves as a foundation for that. We're all working from the same pool of resources together. There's less tit for tat.
As somebody who just put all of our money together when we got married, I resonate with that. And I resonate with the fact that when all of your money's together, like so much about what we do and our decisions really do, at least our big financial decisions, they are there to serve our broader goals. And
right.
It does. And I don't know if this is a part of your research, but it almost acts as there's a check and a balance, because whenever I make a decision or she makes a decision to buy something more significant for us, it's if you're going to spend more than $100 on something that is outside of the norm, just give me a call. Or let's say, for example, that I want to spend $300 on football tickets. We'll have a conversation. It's all about comfort level. And I have not experienced with her a tit for tat where she right away is like, well, if you're going to spend $300 going out with your buddies to a football game, then I'm going to go spend $300, going out to the restaurant with my girlfriends. I've just never experienced that. And we just have this kind of like natural understanding that we both want to enjoy our lives together and independently. Mm-hmm. And it creates just more kind of conversation and understanding the direction that we're going. So that, at least for me, I know I'm a sample size of one, but I am the one that kind of fits into your broader research outcomes. It's interesting.
Right. No, I love that.
Brian is definitely our model modern husband.
I can assure you, I'm very much in the learning phase.
No, I love that, Brian. I actually wanted to highlight, we call those spending thresholds, where you and your partner, you and your wife, you both decide like, hey, we can each spend up to a certain amount and feel comfortable with it. We don't need to get each other's permission, so to speak. But after that point, I'm going to loop you into that conversation. And so I love that you two are.
Makes me feel better.
Yes, so you're doing it.
Find any differences by income or gender?
We did not. And so there is some work out there suggesting that there could be gender differences. It could be possible that females benefit more from merging finances, or maybe males benefit more. But we did not find differences. We found similar patterns over time for both partners. We also looked at income, because there is some work out there by actually some other co-authors of mine that they find that the benefits of joint accounts are most salient among lower income couples. So, and that makes sense, right? You merge your finances, you have a greater pool of resources to draw upon. We looked at income differences and we didn't find any effects in our data. We also looked at the differential earning power within the partners. So, to the extent that one partner earns substantially more than the other, that degree of discrepancy between partners also was not predictive or didn't moderate the effects over time. And so the results really were robust across the socioeconomic spectrum as well as gender.
Interesting. Do you have any theories of why you didn't find any of those differences?
It could be a function of our couples were on average pretty well educated. They were, higher SES to begin with, compared to some of the other work that's been out there in this space. And so it's possible we didn't have enough variability in the sample. So if you recruit a larger, even a bigger sample with more variability, you might observe some differences.
What about, in a perfect world, no one's going to drop out of a study, but we do have attrition. So what about the people that dropped out of the study? Were you able to see any differences or any effects with them? I guess since you were collecting data all along.
Right. So anytime you have longitudinal data collection, you are going to experience, like you said, attrition and also noncompliance. We are having a big ask. We're asking people to merge finances, and some couples might just be like, nope, not comfortable with that. Peace out. And then we don't hear from them again. And so we were very careful in how we designed the experiment. And we included a lot of measures at baseline in anticipation of this attrition. We also randomly assigned more people to the joint condition over the other conditions in anticipation of attrition. And indeed, we did see a higher rate of attrition among the joint account holders. And that's important, right? And so, because that is a caveat to the results, like, well, you're observing the benefits of joint accounts among people willing to keep joint accounts. And so to address that concern or potential limitation, we looked at the couples who stayed in the experiment and compared them against those who dropped out and looked at if there were any meaningful differences at baseline. Like, were we able to see any systematic differences? And so we looked at all of the variables that we collected, and we did not see any systematic differences, which was really good. We found that the couples who stayed in the experiment compared to those who dropped out had the same levels of relationship quality and financial harmony in particular at baseline. And so that helps address those concerns about differential attrition.
Did they drop out because they said that they wanted to combine their finances and no longer participate, or did they just drop out?
A little bit of both. So some couples responded like, hey, my partner is about to be deployed, so this is going to be difficult to do our experiment. And so they couldn't do it that way. Some couples got divorced or, we're no longer engaged. Some also said, like you said, Brian, we don't really want to join yet. We're going to wait until we're actually married. And so there was a whole host of reasons why some people opted not to continue the experiment.
Oh, wait. So these were for engaged couples?
Engaged or newlywed. So some couples had been married less than 1 year.
I see.
But most were engaged.
Do you recommend that couples pull based on research? And I'm sure you're going to say it all depends on the circumstances. Everybody's different. But generally speaking, is it beneficial to merge your finances while you're engaged just prior to getting married? So
based upon our research, I can only speak to these early stages of marriage. And I would say the earlier, the better, so that you can start building your lives together and get on the same page financially. Because when you're more aligned financially, it is going to have better outcomes for your marriage in the long run.
Okay.
So are there other important nuances to kind of consider when we are thinking about joint versus separate bank accounts?
Yes. And so I'm glad you asked that question, because I have been getting emails from some couples saying, hey, me and my partner have had separate accounts for 50 years and we are so happy. Like, what's going on, And so just to be clear, like, we're not saying that joint bank accounts are ideal for every single couple out there. There are going to be more complex financial realities. So, for example, our subjects or our participants were all entering their first marriage. Mm-hmm. If you're entering your third marriage and you had a bad experience with finances previously, maybe joint accounts or rushing into that may not be ideal for you. Or what if you have children from previous unions? Or one partner has a business? It gets a little bit trickier into some of those nuances. So I would say that our research suggests that on average, all things being equal, merging finances is good for marriage, but there are important considerations to take. And so rather than rushing into it, I think it's good to at least have that conversation with your partner to see if this makes the most sense for you.
That makes a lot of sense. That we can't lump everyone into one umbrella rule of thumb there, right? So that you have to consider every unique situation, unique setup for each couples. I'm wondering too, since you've done this amazing study for 2 years, is there going to be a follow-up down the road at all with these couples?
Are you engaged, recently married, or know someone who is? We are empowering engaged and recently married couples who want to manage money in the home as a team with a transition to marriage toolkit. Learn more at modernhusbands.com. Now back to the show.
We hope so. So my co-authors and I were actually talking about this. We're like, we should reach out to our couples again because we still have the email list and ask them if they'd be willing to take another follow-up, because it'd be interesting to see if these patterns, extend over time even further than 2 years. And also, like, do some couples decide to discontinue the joint accounts, after the 2 years? We don't know what happened. And so I would love to do a follow-up with them.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's kind of a honeymoon phase.
Mm-hmm.
Though obviously you saw kind of a decline for those that had separate accounts already. But I wonder if the honeymoon phase kind of continues for those that are in the joint or that share a joint bank accounts.
Right. Or if the trajectory slowly shifts or it starts to look more like the separate trajectory. I would love to do a follow-up.
Can I ask, based off of this research, kind of a follow-up question, but it's probably a different study altogether, because you looked at bank accounts like savings and checking accounts.
Right.
Do you think you would find kind of the same result for a investment brokerage account that was shared versus separate?
I'm not sure, because the amount of transactions might differ. The types of decisions might differ. The short-term, long-term orientation might differ. And so I don't know, actually. That said, I think that if it's a merged account, you might be having similar conversations around it.
Right.
But like, what should we do? Is it good to pursue this, venture over another venture and things like that? And so I think you might see some of the same types of patterns and discussions and dynamics. So the results might look similar, but I don't know. It's an empirical question.
Yeah. I asked them for, personal reasons, I guess, because as we were having this conversation with my fiance about merging accounts, it kind of led naturally into, where are we going to open a joint brokerage account? Because we have our separate ones right now.
Right. When actually that's related to the credit card question as well. And so that was something my husband and I debated, and actually, in full disclosure, so according to our research, I personally with my husband would have joint accounts, but we actually have separate credit cards.
Interesting.
And so that's actually another thing to kind of talk about, is you can still have the benefits of unity and harmony, but also autonomy if that's important to partners. And so for me, I was like, I don't want you seeing every line item purchase. And he feels the same way. Like, I don't want you seeing every line. So we were able to maintain some autonomy with a separate credit card, but then we're pulling from the same pooled resources.
Okay, so Dr. Ross, you brought up brokerage accounts. It just occurred to me that I have a brokerage account that's just my own, and it was just faster. We treat it as it's ours. We have conversations about it, but it was just quicker to set up. So, Dr. Olson, to your point, it even though technically it's my own account, I consider it our account. But boy, the credit card question is essential, because that, to me, that seems far more complicated, because if you're early on in a relationship, you might have one person entering the relationship with a poor credit score, and then another person has a high credit score. So if from my perspective, if I was counseling that couple, and which I'm not a financial counselor, but if I was having a conversation with that couple, I would look at it also through the lens of how can we protect the credit score of the person who has a high credit score, because when you're going through the lending process, there are advantages to having at least one person with a high credit score if you don't need to show the income of the other. But there are also advantages to adding somebody with a low credit score to your credit account as a account holder, or I'm sorry, as an authorized user to help increase their credit score. So you can be very strategic about it. And you could also, I can see how this would get complicated, because if you look at somebody's credit score, if it's low because they mismanage money, not because of like bad circumstances, boy, I would think, I know personally, I would have a lot of anxiety about being a joint account holder with them. So for our listeners, a joint account holder is when you both have the same credit card account. If you are an account holder and there's an authorized user, the authorized user does not have any financial liability. They can rack up a bunch of transactions, but they don't have the liability to pay it off. So if I had a high credit score and my partner had a low one because they're not good managing their credit, I would be really nervous about having any credit accounts that are with them, whether that's a joint account or an authorized user account. Is there any research behind that?
I feel like that's a question that I'm going to be tackling soon after I have go up for tenure. So that's like a really interesting question. I don't know of any research out there looking at credit card dynamics within couples.
Yeah.
So a lot of the financial decision-making literature focuses on how individuals operate. And so there are very few people out there, like I'm in consumer behavior, in marketing, that are actively studying these sorts of questions. But that's something that we talked about. And actually, Brian, it reminded me that there was at least one couple who actually mentioned that, like, I don't want to merge with my partner because he has terrible credit. And so I think that is a question as well to consider. And we asked partners there's something called a tightwad spendthrift. And we do, so a tightwad is someone who does not spend as much as they would ideally like to spend, and a spendthrift spends more than they would ideally like to spend. And there is research suggesting that they tend to marry their financial opposites.
Yeah,
tend to marry with their spendthrift, right? And so it kind of reminds me of that, like, well, if I'm a tightwad, I don't want my spendthrift partner having access to my credit card and being an authorized user. I would love to see some research on that, but to my knowledge, I haven't seen it yet. But I think it's coming because even in my own work, I've looked at bank account structure itself. The next question is, how are couples using the structure? Like, how are they actually operating with those accounts? And then as an extension to credit cards, and I think that's a fascinating area for future work.
And we'll have to have you on in a couple years when you've done this research.
Right. And I go through there, I'll be like, Brian, I'm back. I got more for you.
Well, that would be great. You're welcome. You're welcome anytime. And for our listeners, it is so common for one person in a marriage to be the tightwad. Is that what you? Okay. So
yes, the tightwad.
And then the other one to be the spending thrift. And typically, we found this, and this was an interesting conversation we had with Dr. Strebe from Duke University, who talks about how opposites, and it dives much deeper, but basically what happens when they get married, how they behave. And typically they really like that component from each other. It's something they recognize they're missing. And that as long as the tightwad doesn't restrain spending to the point where they're missing out on living your life now, and as long as the spending thrift doesn't spend so much where they're breaking through these financial guardrails, that it works really well. But that takes regular communication, and according to your research, joint accounts to
and joint accounts
work together. So if you're let's assume that you're engaged or recently married, what is one piece of actionable advice that you have for them? Something simple that they can take action with right away.
I would say to have a conversation about your finances. It's simple. I have some new research underway right now where we find that partners expect financial conversations to be worse than they are.
Oh.
They actually are. So we have the partners forecast, like, how hard do you think this is going to be to talk to your partner? How close are you going to feel? And then we have them do it. And then we follow up. And it turns out they're not nearly as scary and terrible as we think they might be. And so having a conversation and having it over time, it's one of those things that you'll want to revisit. We often advocate for a financial date night. Doesn't sound nearly as sexy as it could be, get some wine, get a show on Netflix ready to go, sit down and talk about your finances. What are your goals? What are your values? What are your attitudes toward money? And maybe how does it relate to childhood experiences? We tend to carry these things with us from childhood into adulthood, and it can help explain why one partner maybe has a really strong need for autonomy and protection and safety, and someone else has a really strong need for fun and spontaneity. And so having that conversation and having it again, I think is really important.
This has been a great conversation, Dr. Olson. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcast. Give us a rating, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with others. Doing so goes a long way in growing our reach and helps married couples learn how to manage money and the home as a team. And join your fellow modern husbands and have links to our podcast, articles, and other resources to manage money in the home as a team sent to your inbox every couple of weeks by subscribing to our newsletter at modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.